p.m. in the Germantown Village Hall boardroom. And also some of us being given public notice in accordance with Wisconsin statute sections 19.83 and 19.84 in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for discussion and action. Roll call shows all Plan Commission members present here, and Mr. Shadid is joining us via WebEx tonight. Next item on the agenda is public input and public appearance. If there is anyone in the audience that would like to come forward for public input or public appearance, you're welcome to do so at this time. All I would ask is you come to the podium and state your name and your address for the record. If you are here to speak on any of the public hearings that are listed under new business, I would wish that you would wait until those items come up on the agenda, but if there is anything else besides what's on the public hearings that somebody would like to come forward for, you're welcome to do so for public input and public appearance at this time. Anyone wishing to come forward? Anyone via WebEx? No? Okay. Then we'll go on to the next item, which is the approval of minutes from the September 14th, 2020 Plan Commission meeting.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? No discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. That then takes us to new business. We'll start with new business item A. MSI General, agent for Mold Makers Leasing and Investments LLP, which are the property owners, and MGS Manufacturing Group Incorporated, located at West 190 North 11701 Mold Makers Way, for a conditional use permit application to encroach into the 25-foot wetland setback pursuant to section 24.04 subsection 5 of the Shoreland Wetland Zoning District. Tonight on the agenda, there is a public hearing and action by the Plan Commission. To give us some more information and background on our first item of new business, I'll turn the meeting over to our Community Development Director, Jeff Retzloff. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, MSI General, agent for MGS Manufacturing, the owner of the property, is requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow development within a 25-foot wetland setback on their 24-acre property on Maple Road in the Germantown Industrial Park, as shown on the screen and highlighted in red. You will recall in the last couple of months, the Plan Commission and Board have reviewed and processed a couple of applications, few applications for MGS, including site plan approval for a 121,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility expansion for their campus in the industrial park. Also, a certified survey map was approved to combine 4 separate parcels into one, the 24-acre parcel that you see highlighted on the screen. And as part of that CSM, an application, a request, if you will, to vacate Mold Makers Way, the existing cul-de-sac that lies in the middle of the property, in order for the expansion to take place. As part of that process, 5 wetlands were located on the property. I've got a graphic here. The 5 wetlands are highlighted, they're outlined in red. 4 of the 5 are highlighted in orange on the screen. Those 4 were classified or declared to be artificial wetlands and not regulated by the DNR, the Army Corps, or the Village of Germantown. The 5th wetland that does remain regulated is associated with the drainage ditch that lies on the south side of the property, as you can see on the graphic on the lower portion of the property. As part of the site plan approval and expansion project, MGS is proposing to install a water main loop that would go from Maple along the south property line and back up to Fulton Drive along the west side of their property. Also to construct, and I'll bring up the site plan here, construct a loading dock and circulation area and a paved access drive, a second access drive around the perimeter of the property that exits onto Maple Road as shown on the plan along the south side of the property. That area encroaches into a 25-foot wetland setback associated with that fifth wetland that lies along the south side of the property and along the drainage ditch. One of the conditions of approval requires that the owner obtain a conditional use permit to allow that encroachment into the setback area and to prepare a mitigation plan. MGS has identified three encroachment areas in the mitigation plan for a combined 25,870 square feet or 0.6 acres of total area within that setback that would be encroached by some development activity. The majority of it, just over 24,000 square feet, would be less than 3 feet of grade change, what we refer to as horizontal development. That requires a 1-to-1 compensation ratio and just under 2,000 square feet of grade change, more than 3 feet, requiring a 2-to-1 compensation ratio. The compensation that is to be provided by MGS is in the area highlighted in green. I guess you could call it three separate areas that collectively are referred to as the mitigation areas. The total area is 27,670 square feet, which is the minimum required for compensation, to be provided in the form of planting and maintaining a native prairie, a seed mix around the perimeter of the existing wetland to provide further buffering and protection. The staff recommendation is to approve the conditional use permit to allow MGS to encroach into the 25-foot wetland setback as proposed, along with the wetland setback compensation plan dated October 6th, subject to one condition, and that condition is simply that they establish an annual monitoring program and provide results to the village, a status report, if you will, on the quality of the prairie and the maintenance activities for it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would hereby open this public hearing by stating, a notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held before the Village of Germantown Plan Commission at the Germantown Village Hall located on Mequon Road in Germantown and virtually through the WebEx platform on Monday, October 12th at 6:30 p.m. or later. The purpose of said hearing is to hear any and all parties, their attorneys or agents, for or against the application filed for a conditional use permit to encroach into the 25-foot wetland setback pursuant to Section 24.04, subsection 5 of the Shoreland Wetland Zoning District on the property described below. The applicant is John Coots, MSI General Agent for Paul Manley, Mold Makers Leasing and Investments LLP, property owner for MGS Manufacturing, and the property is located on West 190, North 11701, Mold Makers Way. Is there anyone that wishes to come forward at this time to speak at the public hearing in regards to the approval of the wetland setback as described in the public hearing? Anyone wishing to come forward to speak for or against? One last time, is there anyone wishing to come forward to speak for or against the wetland setback application? Then this public hearing is now closed. Then we now take it to the Plan Commissioners. Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve the setback as presented.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Baum.
Mr. Retzlaff, can you explain to me, in a swale like this, why is this considered wetlands? I asked for a personal purpose and an education. My yard was just tagged with flag after flag after flag, and all the farm fields around me are flagged for wetlands in the swales, in the culverts. So everything where the water travels in my neighborhood is now considered wetlands. Why is this considered a wetland?
Well, the drainage ditch has been there for quite some time.
Yeah.
And under the revised or most recently changed DNR rules for identifying wetlands that are subject to regulation and not deemed to be artificial, this one meets their qualifications in terms of the soil characteristics, the vegetation, and the length of time that it has been there effectively. I mean, one of the criterias that they use, I think most principally, is historical aerial photography. One of the criteria that was changed and that enables the DNR staff to identify quote-unquote artificial wetlands without necessarily having to go out into the field for every one is to look at historical aerial photography and see if there are ditches, wetland areas that appear, have the characteristics of wetland areas visually for many years previously. And in this case, let me get back to that graphic. Those orange highlighted wetlands that are effectively on the interior part of the property are likely to be very low spots where water has collected.
Collects.
And the type of vegetation over time has changed to be similar to that which typically grows in a wet environment. But when they dig a little deeper, if they actually go out in the field, they'll tend to find that the soil characteristics aren't necessarily those of a true wetland. And when they match that up against historical aerial photography, they found that those areas didn't appear to be wet, modeled soil characteristics visually, going back 15, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
They had the same issue with our business park many years ago, where the air gas site is developed. There, the wetlands sort of evolved or grew over time, principally because of what the DNR advised the village was poor management practices, where water was running off and accumulating in spots that enabled it to evolve or develop characteristics of a wetland, even though with a little more research they concluded they're really artificial by definition.
So in my neighborhood, I live at an intersection, and all the ditches on all four corners of that have been slated as wetlands just this week. Flags appeared everywhere. And I can't believe that the swales that are running to move water, and this has been 20 years that I've lived there, so I can't support that this little swale is a wetland. So I will vote for approving anything within that area as presented.
Further discussion? Any further discussion on the motion to approve? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Next item under new business is item B, Newman Developments, Inc., agent for Renwood LLC, property owner, Outlet 2 of Renwood subdivision, a conditional use permit application to encroach into the 25-foot wetland setback and 75-foot navigable waterway setback areas pursuant to Section 24.04, subsection 3, subparagraph C, subparagraph 5 of the Shoreland Wetland Zoning District, and is listed on tonight's agenda for public hearing and Plan Commission action. To give us more information on this new business item as well is our Community Development Director, Jeff Retzloff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is just like our last one. Newman Developments, Inc. is seeking a conditional use permit to allow them to develop within a 25-foot wetland and 75-foot navigable waterway setback that is located in the area that's highlighted, circled in red, as part of the Renwood development. The Renwood Plan Development District Plan that's shown on the screen shows the south part of the overall development It's approximately 67 acres in size, includes approval for 111 dwelling units. Total dwelling units, 47 single-family lots and 44 multifamily condominium units. I'm sorry, that's not 111, that's 91. Apologize. 59, just under 60 acres of total open space is in the darker and lighter green areas highlighted on the screen. just under 21 acres of which is identified as wetland. And on that north part of the platted lot area that's highlighted there, circled, there is a navigable waterway that runs diagonally through the property, and associated with that waterway are wetlands. They were included in the open space area, including the setback areas, so all the platted lots were platted outside of those setbacks. Now, as part of the recent development, Newman Development had excess topsoil associated with the grading and improvements that were made, and are proposing to move that topsoil into portions of the wetland setback and navigable waterway setback areas to distribute that topsoil, grade it into gently rolling berms, and to match the existing topography to the south on the platted lots. As I mentioned earlier, the village does allow development in the 25-foot wetland and 75-foot navigable waterway setbacks with compensation for the amount of area of encroachment based on the type of development. In this case, the disturbance totals 78,367 square feet, or 1.8 acres, identified in 4 disturbance areas shown in this graphic, highlighted in the orange color, the sort of salmon color. And that 78,000 square feet of disturbance is being compensated for in mitigation areas highlighted in green within the remaining portions of the setback and adjacent to existing wetlands identified on the site, in a total of 87,191 square feet in the form of native prairie plantings as well. The staff recommendation is to approve a conditional use permit for the wetland disturbance, subject to the one condition requiring a 3-year annual monitoring report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will open tonight's public hearing on this new business item by stating a notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held before the Village of Germantown Plan Commission at the Germantown Village Hall located on Mequon Road in Germantown, and virtually through the WebEx platform on Monday, October 12th at 6:30 p.m. or later. The purpose of said hearing is to hear any and all parties, their attorneys, or agents for or against the application filed for a conditional use permit to encroach into this 25-foot wetland setback and the 75-foot navigable water setback areas pursuant to sections 24.04, subsection 3, subparagraph C and 5 of the Shoreland Wetland Zoning District on the property described below. The applicant is Ryan Frisch, Newman Developments, Inc., agent for Renwood LLC, which is the property owner, and the property address is Renwood Court. Is there anyone wishing to come forward at this time to speak for or against the conditional use permit to encroach into the 25-foot wetland setback or the 75-foot navigable waterway setback? Anyone wishing to come forward to speak for or against? Ma'am, can I ask you to come forward to the podium and state your name and your address for the record, please?
Susan Bernhard, North 120, West 14709 Freistadt Road. I just have a question. There will be a lot more development of other houses and lots. Does that mean that there's going to be many more berms being made with the excess soil that's being taken from the rest of the the houses and the lots? Where is that soil going?
At this point, we don't know if there will be any additional berms proposed. I think it's fair to say that as part of the development, the original plan was to do the necessary calculations so that they didn't have excess topsoil after distribution or redistribution to the lots after they were improved. In this case, there was some leftover topsoil. The village code requires topsoil to remain within the boundaries of a property, and so the first step is to try and find a location within the site, and as Newman has proposed this evening. But as far as future development, it's unknown. Hopefully, there won't be the need to find a home for leftover topsoil, that they do their calculations correctly and everything balances properly.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much more development there's going to be, but I thought that the roads were going to go further north with more development. Maybe I don't,
That would be Phase 2.
Phase 2.
Yep, the
So I'm
Phase 2
just
would
wondering-
be going up to Freistadt Road. This is Phase 1, like from Mequon to the area you see there.
Right.
And the leftover topsoil is more from the, call it the infrastructure development, of what they put in the roadways, the sewer, and the water, which the developer has taken control of and has handled. When it comes down to individual houses and leftover topsoil, it's usually not as prevalent that there be leftover topsoil for that, because it's a one-by-one basis. But when you're doing a development of this size, you can run into excess topsoil. And what you have is, at the time that the individual houses would start getting built, and some are being built now, you would have an approved grading plan that would not be changed dramatically to add additional berms to. Now, what could happen is, as they develop the northern section, or call it Phase 2, it's possible that they would have leftover topsoil that they would need to get rid of in a similar fashion, but not to the south. This would be the one time for the major development or the infrastructure development part of this process.
And could you repeat again what the rule was, that most of the topsoil has to stay on the development, or what was that?
Within the perimeter
Explain
of
that,
the
please.
development site.
Pardon?
Within the perimeter of the development site. So the north half, much like the south half of development, has platted lots and roads just west of your property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward to speak for or against the conditional use permit to encroach into the 25-foot wetland setback or the 75-foot navigable water setback? Anyone wishing to come forward to speak for or against?
I would like to make a comment.
Sure. And your name and address, please? Name and address?
Jan Miller. Jan Miller, W151 and 10297 Winslow Circle West.
Good evening, Ms. Miller. What is your comment?
My comment is there are a lot of subdivisions being built. There is a lot of excess topsoil. I don't think it's relevant for the setback to change due to the wetland that is running through the property. They clearly knew that this wetland and the setback of 75 feet was, part of the statute. So I believe that this subdivision should take their topsoil and move it to a different location. There is no guarantee that the plantings that they're proposing to put in will take and stop any erosion. So the purpose for having the wetlands is to protect it, and that's why we have the 75 feet. So I'm opposed to them creating any kind of a berm and planting. They should move the dirt to an outside location. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else wishing to come forward to speak for or against the conditional use permit to encroach in the 25-foot wetland setback or the 75-foot navigable water setback? Anyone else wishing to come forward to speak for or against? Then this public hearing is now closed. Plan Commission?
I make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for Runwood LLC to allow the development within the 25-foot and 75-foot waterway setback as proposed.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on that motion to approve? The only comment that I would make is based on the regulation of not being able to remove the soil, and part of that wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Retzloff, but earlier developments were stripping topsoil and taking it away and selling it, and then was having to bring in more in order to make their grades or their fill. And part of the regulation that was instilled was to prevent that from occurring.
That's correct.
Okay. So with that, then, there really isn't a place to put it. We do allow some development within the setback, but we're not going up to the edge of the setback or within the actual floodplain or into the waterway. It's just within a 25-foot area or a 75-foot area, but not all the way to the edge.
That's correct.
Okay.
The village maintains an extra setback, if you will, beyond what the DNR requires, and that additional 25 feet is sort of a buffer area that we've created, knowing that development adjacent or near a wetland, oftentimes the contractors aren't as particular or careful, and they, if the development's proposed right up to the edge of the wetland, there's a good chance that they might deposit something into the wetland itself or run a piece of equipment in there. So the 25-foot buffer is sort of an extra buffer area that the village has created and requires this additional buffering protection if there's any encroachment within it.
Okay. Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Leshevsky?
In this case, the 25-foot setback is, if I look at this picture on here, Mr. Retzloff, is or was a fallow farm field? And is it kind of similar to an artificial wetland? I mean, it was farmed at some point and now that's become the buffer?
Yes, there was some farming activity on the land to the south of the open space area. However, the wetland here is, I'm trying to get to that original graphic.
Yeah, it looks like it's got a bunch of buckthorn in it or something.
Part of that environmental corridor.
Yeah, for the most part, the wetland associated there is a legitimate wetland associated with the navigable stream. In this case, there's a rather steep drop-off between the platted lot area and the wetland setback. So if you visited the site, you'll see that adding and moving the topsoil and creating a more aesthetically pleasing and natural transition from the platted lots to the wetland area visually will appear more aesthetically pleasing than what's there now.
Mr. Kimmler?
I was just wondering kind of the process. How long, does it take to move all the dirt there, or all the soil? And then, how do you protect the soil until plants become established? You see a lot in developments, when they're moving soil around and they're creating berms, and there'll be a big rain event, and then, all the water's running into the ditch and all the soil's going with it. So, how do we protect the wetland from the erosion during those type of events? Is this going to be during winter when they're moving all the soil,
The plan is to try is to move it this fall yet.
Okay.
And stabilize it over the winter and plant. There'll be typical erosion control measures installed, silt fencing and the like.
Yeah.
To protect it from running into the wetland area.
Yes.
Will there be like straw mats on top of the mounds then after they finish grading them?
I have not seen the construction plans yet for the berms or the erosion control plan that will be submitted as part of the erosion control permit, assuming that the conditional use permit is granted. Is there a particular item or item that we should make note of to make sure the engineer looks works out for that?
Yeah. I'm having trouble finding it here on my little screen, but I would just hope that, if we're moving soil into an area like that, that we can do everything possible to protect from erosion going into the wetland, especially if they're moving in fall, and then we're going to get some heavy rainfalls in spring, and, I don't know, the silt fence, that doesn't seem to work a lot of times, so, if the engineering department can look into making sure that the strictest measures are taken to protect that area, I think that'd be good.
I mean, they will enforce the standard erosion control measures that are required, but if there's something extraordinary you think might be needed, we can certainly suggest that.
No, I'll leave that up to them. I'm certainly not an engineer, so I couldn't recommend that, I don't think, but thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to approve? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I didn't catch that, Mr. Shadid. Was that for or against?
It was an aye, sorry about that.
Not a problem. Thank you for clarifying. Motion is approved. Next item under new business is new business item C. Stephen Buck, Gale Foods LLC, agent for AG&L Dairy LLC, property owner located at North 116 West 15970 Main Street, a planned development district amendment to include a nitrogen generator unit, conditional use permit application for a 52-foot nitrogen storage tank, site plan review for installation of equipment. On tonight's agenda is public hearing and action by the Plan Commission. To give us some more information and background on this new business item is our Associate Planner, Emily Zant.
Thank you. Gale Foods is seeking approval for an amendment to the Gale Foods Plan Development District that was approved in 2019, a site development and building plans for a proposed nitrogen generation facility, and a conditional use permit for an accessory structure over 45 feet in height, located at their Main Street facility. Oops. This site is zoned as a Gale Foods PDD and is surrounded by a mix of business and residential zoning. As part of the Gale Foods PDD approved last year, several improvements or commitments were made by Gale Foods for their property, including the operational equipment and or other facility changes to reduce the current level of noise associated with the process of receiving or generating nitrogen. And so this is where this proposal is coming from. So in terms of the Plan Development District, they are requesting an amendment to the PD to specifically allow a nitrogen generation facility permitted as an accessory use for the food production plant on Main Street. The nitrogen generation facility will deliver a sufficient quantity of nitrogen to meet the normal operating demand of the plant. There are some occasions where the additional liquid nitrogen will be needed to be delivered, including the occasional maintenance or repair of the proposed generation facility, or a temporary increase in the demand for production purposes. Gale Foods would need to rely on the tanker delivery as a backup supply of liquid nitrogen in those situations. The existing nitrogen storage tanks will remain in place as a backup supply for operations. Delivery of liquid nitrogen to the site by tanker truck will be significantly reduced. Gale Foods anticipates approximately 1 truck delivery per week, whereas currently there's approximately 2 to 3 tanker truck deliveries per day. So the proposed nitrogen facilities will be located in an existing parking lot on the east side of the property, just south of Fond du Lac Avenue, and it's highlighted there in red for you. The closest portion of the proposed fencing will be located 25.4 feet from the road right-of-way line, which meets the required front yard or street setback in the PDD. The proposed location is buffered from Fond du Lac Avenue by limestone cliffs and mature trees. This is an image provided by Gale Foods just to show the location of where the nitrogen facility will be. It will be set behind the trees, however. This is looking northwest along Highway 145 or Fond du Lac Avenue. And this is looking southeast. The equipment will be enclosed on 4 sides with a 6-foot tall security fence with barbed wire at the top. Safety bollards, 42 inches in height, will be located outside of the fencing on the north and west sides of the project for protection from on-site traffic. Gale Foods is still working with Airgas to figure out the details of the piping of the liquid nitrogen from the generation facility to the production facility. Currently, the plan is to either run the pipes underground the entire way to the entry point into the building, or to run them to the east side of the building and then up over the roof. You can see the existing entry point to the building highlighted in, or circled in blue there. There'll be pole-mounted lighting and wall-pack lights proposed for the nitrogen generation facility. This project, it will be located on existing impervious surface, and actually will reduce the total impervious surface of the site by about 1,400 square feet, as some of the existing pavement will be replaced with topsoil seed mulch in the final development. The proposed improvements will eliminate approximately 15 standard parking spaces from this area. However, the proposed enlargement of the parking area to the south, as approved as part of the site plan in 2019, will include a total of 49 additional parking spaces. The proposed nitrogen facility requires the use of a cold box, which extends 52 feet above grade. Conditional use permit is required in the M1 district in order for an accessory structure to exceed 45 feet in height. Staff inquired with Gale Foods representatives about an alternative to this height. Airgas does not offer an alternative that can meet the routine nitrogen demands for Gale Foods. So just some staff comments from planning and zoning. This proposal does again fulfill that commitment made as part of the Gale Foods PDD and the expansion plans approved last year. This project will reduce the noise related to nitrogen delivery, which will reduce deliveries from 2 to 3 times per day to approximately 1 delivery per week. The loudest element of the proposed generation system is the air compressors, which will have a noise level of about 83 decibels at 3 feet from the unit, but will be approximately 55 decibels at the property line. This does meet the maximum noise level permitted in the M1 district, which is 70 decibels at the property line. Staff feels that the proposed location of the project is well screened and buffered from Main Street and Fond du Lac Avenue. Although the 52-foot cold box will extend beyond the height of the trees and will be visible from surrounding properties, it has a diameter of 6 feet, which is significantly smaller than the diameter of any of the existing silos on site, which are 14 feet. Further, the project is located over 200 feet north of Main Street, minimizing the visual impact of Main Street. The fire department did note that they do have the correct equipment to respond in the case of an emergency with the nitrogen generation facility. The major concern related to the facility is oxygen deficiency, which can be negated with the breather apparatus owned by the department. If needed in an extreme situation, there are also resources available for hazardous material response from Washington County and Milwaukee. As a part of the site plan approved in 2019, a fire access was required onto Fond du Lac Avenue. The proposed nitrogen facility is located to the north of that proposed access and will not interfere with Gale Foods meeting that access requirement. It will also not interfere with any on-site traffic circulation. So you can see the access point approved in the plan last year is circled in red, and then the proposed nitrogen facility location is highlighted with a blue star. So it's staff's recommendation to approve the Gale Foods Plan Development District to include nitrogen generation facility as a permitted accessory use for the property at N116 W15970 Main Street. Staff also recommends approving the site development and building plans for the proposed nitrogen generation facility, subject to 4 conditions. And also to approve the conditional use permit for the proposed 52-foot tall cold box silo for the nitrogen generation facility at the Gale Foods production plant located on Main Street, subject to 1 condition.
Okay, thank you. Then I would open this public hearing by hereby stating a notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held before the Village of Germantown Plan Commission at the Germantown Village Hall located on Mequon Road in Germantown and virtually through the WebEx platform on Monday, October 12th at 6:30 p.m. or later. The purpose of said hearing is to hear any and all parties, their attorneys or agents for or against the following applications filed by the applicant for, number 1, an amendment to the Gale Foods Plan Development District to include a nitrogen generation unit. Number 2, a conditional use permit for a 52-foot nitrogen storage tank pursuant to Section 17.33, subsection 3, subparagraph I, for the property described below. The applicant is Stephen Buck, Gale Foods LLC, agent for AG&L Dairy LLC, property owner, and the property is located at North 116, West 15970, Main Street. Before I ask if anyone wishes to come forward, I do have 2 communications that we received to the Village Hall, one via letter and one via email. The first one was received on October 5th, and it reads, "To whomever this concerns, Gale Foods has bought up most of houses and buildings on Main Street. The board wanted it to be like downtown Cedarburg. What a joke. The parking on Main Street is a hazard. And Oakwood Village went to every meeting to stop Saxony Village, and what a waste of time that was. We found out later that it was approved years ago, and the village made Germantown residents look like fools. We who live here are left with a noisy place to live. Dogs are peeing and pooping halfway up our grass, and some people pick it up and some don't. The road, they said, would be about 5 cars a day. It's much more, and is a racetrack. 3 years of construction trucks and dump truck semis with roof trusses and other building supplies. The road is awful, and the road is a racetrack in our once quiet neighborhood, and the police cars are going there all the time. I will never go to a town meeting again. It is such a joke. We need a speed bump, but it will never get it because the village would have to pay for it, and we are not important." And that comes from Janet Olson. And today we received a email, and the email reads, in the subject line, "Public hearing, Gale Foods amend the Gale Foods Plan Development District and CUP application." Reads a couple of simple questions. Will the new nitrogen generation process just replace one noise with another? I noticed in the elevation view on page 8 of the PPD amendment application something that appears to be a large exhaust pipe on the ventilation cooling air inlet. On page 12, it is labeled the F12 silencer. To me, this implies that some level of noise is going to be made during operations. Is there another nitrogen generation plant similar in design to the one being proposed by Airgas and Gale nearby, so the village trustees can see it in operation and hear the noise level to be expected once it goes into operation? Will there be an operational runtime window established, so this process will only run between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., Monday through Friday? Will Gale and Airgas be maintaining the existing nitrogen equipment as a backup if the new system ever fails or needs to be taken down for any extended maintenance? Thank you, and that is from Bob Plastine, who is located at North 118, West 15735, Williams Drive in Germantown, Wisconsin. Those are the two communications we received in regards to this public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward at this time to speak for or against the amendment to the Gale Foods Plan Development District or the conditional use permit for a 52-foot nitrogen storage tank? And I would ask to come to the front and state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is Julie Reichert. I live at W156N11580 Pilgrim Road. I've been a resident here for 30-some years. My question is, what is the safety issue with nitrogen so close to houses and people's, businesses? I'm concerned about the safety of nitrogen. Nitrogen can be an explosive. Or do anybody have any answers for that?
I'm not an expert in regards to what nitrogen can or cannot do, but I know that in running it past our fire department, their statement is the fire department has indicated that it has the correct equipment to respond in the case of any emergency with nitrogen generation facility. The major concern related to nitrogen generation is oxygen deficiency, which can be negated with breather apparatus. If needed, the fire department has additional resources available for hazardous material response from Washington County and Milwaukee. And that's the only thing that I have in regards to any emergency.
That still doesn't answer the question, though, because sure, they can respond, but what is this a safe thing to have in our community, especially in a residential area? Because there can always be accidents or things can happen and,
We do, I believe we do have a representative for Gale Foods here who could respond to that question.
Sir?
Yeah, come on up.
Yes, come on to the front.
Oh, and other question is, why can't you put it closer to the factory rather than where it's going to be? Because it's an unsightly location for it.
I can answer that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward.
Steve Buck from Gale Foods. Thanks for bringing up the safety concern, certainly. My background is in chemical engineering, so I do have a little bit of knowledge in this area. I'll respond to a couple of things that you asked about. You had mentioned, is nitrogen explosive? And nitrogen is not explosive, it's inert, so it does not react with other chemicals. And what this system does, and what we're doing now, is we use nitrogen to put in our product so that it doesn't react with the product itself and cause off flavors. So right now we're using the same amount of nitrogen as this system will generate. However, the nitrogen that we bring in by tanker truck, we hook up to a tank and transfer liquid nitrogen into the tanks at our facility. And while this is a safe process, we feel that it will be safer for the community to install this generation facility that will generate nitrogen gas that we will then pipe into our factory. The system will be monitored 24/7 by a control system, and if there are upsets or problems noted by the control system, it will automatically shut down. Nitrogen is the main component of atmospheric air. The system separates that nitrogen out, enriches it, and sends it to our facility. So any discharges from it are just returning that nitrogen right back into the atmosphere that it came from. In terms of your question, why are we locating where it is? The location at our facility we think is the least impact to the surrounding neighborhoods and areas, as well as allows us to maintain the traffic through our site for trucks and other vehicles that we need.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward to speak for or against the amendment to the Gale Foods Plan Development District or the conditional use permit? And please state your name and your address for the record.
Name is Scott Barkow, B-A-R-K-O-W, live at West 154, North 11651 Daniels Drive, which is directly east of the Gale's plant. So you said that it is inert, but it does deplete oxygen from the air, is that correct?
It's part of air, so if you take the oxygen out, which is what the system does, yes, what it generates is deficient in oxygen.
So how far of an area will it deplete the oxygen?
It does not deplete the oxygen in the space that it's operating. It actually returns that oxygen back to the environment, so the area around it will be slightly enriched in oxygen, but not significantly.
Okay. My concern, and we emailed somebody on the board but never got a response, was the noise factor. Already you have some kind of a cooling unit, which is going to be really close to where this new proposed thing is going to be. And from sitting in my backyard on a lot of summer days, it's not difficult, but it's annoying because we're hearing this motor, this generator, these fans from your cooling unit already. So how much more noise is this going to, produce?
Yes, you may come, I wish you could answer the question at the microphone so that those that are watching can hear you. I would appreciate it, thank you.
So your question was how much additional noise?
Right, because it's already noisy with your cooling unit that's up there, and if you could do anything to silence that, put something around that one in addition to what you've got going on, proposed going on.
Sure, that's not something I'm prepared to address at the moment. I just don't know the answer to that. But the amount of noise that this unit will make at 83 decibels is the loudest part of it, or well below the requirement at the property line, is significantly less than what the nitrogen unloading process generates.
That's very noisy, yeah, I mean, that's really annoying.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I always wondered what that was. I didn't know if it was ammonia being pumped in or what it was, but you're saying that's nitrogen being delivered?
Yep, so this process will generate that nitrogen on-site instead of requiring us to bring in 2 to 3 tanker trucks of liquid nitrogen per day.
So what does that compare to what the cooling unit that you've got going on now that is annoying?
I don't want to say for sure because I don't know what the decibel level of the cooling unit is, so I don't want to give an answer to that and be wrong.
So
I think it will be less, but I don't want to say that for sure because I haven't measured it.
What's being proposed is at the property line is 55 decibels. My voice, as I'm speaking now, carries 60 decibels.
Okay. So, addressing that issue, what about the cooling unit that you have? Why is that so noisy, and what can we, how did that get, how did this keep on getting added on into the middle of a downtown residential area with a school nearby and restaurants and and small businesses? You have a storage unit or something out in the industrial park. Why didn't the village say, hey, enough is enough, you guys got to start locating outside of downtown?
Part of it has happened outside of downtown, but they were in their property rights to request additional development. It would be easy to say that they've been there as long as a lot of the other houses or developments that are in downtown, which could be, if you want to go back to its history, almost 100 years. So it's not something that started yesterday. It's a growth process over many years that took over the land, and what you see Gale's Foods property as today. Within their last development increase, they did say that they would do what they could to bring nitrogen generation on site to help bring that noise level down on the twice-a-day deliveries that they were receiving, and addressed it directly, knowing that it was a concern for some of the residents that came forward and spoke out against the development they proposed that's currently going on. And this fulfills that promise, to bring that generation on site so that it doesn't get to the noise level that people were experiencing twice a day, every day, to bring nitrogen on site.
So what about the,
To the microphone, if you could, please.
So what about my other question then, about the cooling unit that's already been there for who knows how long? I don't think it's been there that long.
The cooling unit, I think, is normally brought on Main Street for the summer months. Is that
No,
correct?
it's going to be right in that area. It's a great big huge unit that's sitting on top of the roof. And it's got 4 enormous fans out there up on top that, I'm assuming it's a cooling unit. I'm not an expert.
I'm not-
It just looks like a cooling unit of some sort.
And is it part of this development, or?
No, it's already in place.
Then I don't know.
Okay.
And I can't speak to it without guessing. Planner Retzloff.
I was just going to add that last year, when the PDD was approved, this and other similar issues were raised, and the ownership group made a commitment to reduce noise by making investment in new equipment and equipment replacements. And I don't know if this is the only noise reduction improvement that they're planning on making, but they've made a strong commitment to reduce the noise, and this is I think the first step towards doing just that. And I think it's worth noting that if there's a next item that Gale Foods should be looking at, would be if they're truly cooling units or whatever units you're referring to, that should be on the top of their list for some modification, if necessary, to reduce the noise.
That's fair. Okay.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward to speak for or against the amendment to the Gale Foods Planned Development District or the conditional use permit?
We do have one individual on WebEx that would like to speak.
Okay. Then could they please state their name and their address for the record?
My name is Jan Miller. I live at W151 and 10297 Windsong Circle West. And I would like to make a comment on this Gale proposal. I would ask the Plan Commission to deny this building of the 52-foot silo for the nitrogen. I have a couple of concerns. First of all, there's no concrete plan for the pipeline of nitrogen to the plant. They do not have a plan whether it goes in the ground or above the ground. If you're asking for this 52-foot silo of nitrogen, you better know how it's going to be delivered. I don't think it's a complete proposal. Second of all, the 52 feet is above the code. We always seem to be making exceptions to Gale Foods. Gale Foods is a great employer in the Germantown area. However, we keep making exceptions. I don't see why we would need, or they would need, the 52-foot silo. If Airgas, maybe they could make a new silo that would be within the 45-foot regulation. Secondly, the fire department said that, if there's a fire, we could handle it. If it gets out of hand, we have to go to other villages. That doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy. I'm sorry. And then my biggest concern is, here you have not an engineer, to either have a compressor or an evaporator, and it's going to still make noise. This is something for production efficiency, it's clear. In addition to that, it's in a cage. It's not in a building. You got nitrogen exposed and a lot of equipment out here in just a fence. That's all it is. It looks like a recipe for kids to climb in or something like that. I think it's a hazard. Also, my big question for Dale is, have they completed the construction of the facade that they promised the village that was going to go up when they tore down the 6 homes on the corner of Church and Main? I think that the village should see some improvements to the building, and then they can do other expansions. So I propose that you deny this plan until the plan is complete and they have a pipeline from their gas, either regardless of whether it's in the ground or above the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else that wishes to come forward to speak for or against the amendment to the Gale Foods Plan Development District or the conditional use permit for a 52-foot nitrogen storage tank? As a resident or as a trustee?
Art Zabel, N97 W15737 Burrow Road. The questions I have is that I want to make sure I understand the process. If I heard correctly, they're going to take the atmosphere, take the nitrogen out of the atmosphere. My assumption then is that you're going to turn it into liquid nitrogen, which is part of the area that's there. You're going to use the liquid nitrogen as propellant to move your the product through its lines, because the nitrogen doesn't mix with your product, so you can separate it out later, if I understood correctly. Now, the other question I have is that when you're putting this plant, you're putting it away from the building. To me, it would make a lot more sense to have it where the other towers are, so it would blend in and fit. I'm not sure how the internal plumbing works in your building to see why you would bring it into it, but if I have a bunch of towers that sort of fit and sort of blend in, it may fit better than to have it standing alone by itself. And why are you moving it away from your building and not closer to the building if that's the main product that you're using to move your product through its lines?
Thank you.
To answer, I think, part of your first question of what this system will generate, and I want to just clear up a little bit of confusion of exactly what it does. This system that we are proposing will supply gaseous nitrogen to our plant. So the pipe that comes out of it will have nitrogen gas at atmospheric temperatures and higher pressures to convey it into our plant. So there won't be any liquid nitrogen making its way from this generation system into our facility. The system itself uses liquid nitrogen, but it stays within the confines of that fenced-in area. As to, again, why we put it where we did on the site, looking at the different traffic patterns and how much space that this equipment takes up, and the fact that it's unmanned and doesn't need to be attached to the facility or part of a building, it's this space on our lot we thought was far from the other important areas surrounding in the community, as well as away from traffic on our site. Another important consideration for us was where can we locate it where it's not going to be near any semi-truck traffic, for example. So we feel that that's the best and safest place on our site for it. Does that answer your questions?
Do you know the rules?
Don't walk so far away.
It does, but it creates another problem. The fact that you want to move it away from the truck traffic makes me think that there's more of a hazard there than what normally would be if you're concerned about it. And if our fire department has a problem with hazmat, and we got to call in other neighboring communities to handle the hazmat, then maybe we need to work out something where we get some type of a hazmat unit more readily available.
We would have to call in anybody from the other communities for any hazmat call. We have a very limited hazmat response in regards to it, and it would be probably for a larger emergency. Nowhere is it stated in what I read about the fire department that they would need additional communities to support any type of emergency there, but anywhere within the village that would be a large fire emergency, I think we would bring in support for. I don't care who it is, or what's burning. It gets to a point where you are bringing in support from outside communities once it gets up to a certain level, and that's, up to the fire department to decide what that is. But the statement that I read from the fire department did not say that they would require additional support from surrounding communities to suppress any fire there.
I thought the last sentence said that they would require support
If
from the...
needed, the fire department has additional resources available for hazardous material response from Washington County and Milwaukee.
So they would have to basically use them.
If
indeed we
needed.
are creating something here that is new and different, that may create a hazmat problem.
You already
Wouldn't
have
it be-
nitrogen on site.
Well,
You have ammonia on site.
right, but if I'm now going to start taking and generating gas from liquid nitrogen instead of the other way around, I'm using the liquid nitrogen and turning it into a gaseous state. I'm going to take that gaseous state and move it into the building. If something happens there and I need something, instead of relying on, once I get there and I put on my oxygen mask and handle what's there, then realize I have another problem, wouldn't it be nice to have that ability here without we having to rely on other people? Just my point of view.
So you would be in favor of enhancing our hazardous material response of our fire department within our budget?
Or have them help out creating that.
You're putting Gales in a difficult space. Part of what brought this forward was the complaint of the noise that was generated from the nitrogen deliveries that were happening twice a day, every day, and their response to that is we'd put it on site, and everybody at that time said, that's great, let's see you do that, and I won't believe it until I see it. Here it is. Here they are fulfilling their promise to help reduce the noise in this area, and they still can't win. It's a tough place to be. Anyone else that wishes to come forward to speak for or against the amendment to the Gale Foods Plan Development District or the conditional use permit? Anyone else? If not, then this public hearing is now closed. Commissioners?
I'll start out by making the motion, but I'm going to go out of order. I'm going to take the second motion first, planning and zoning recommendation for conditional use. I will make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the 52-foot tall cold box silo for the proposed nitrogen generation as proposed.
Motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Baum.
Is there a reason why we have to be 52 feet? Why can we not stay within the confines of our ordinances?
I believe, I'm sorry.
No, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just to, again, kind of clarify what this is, this piece of equipment, I'm not going to exactly answer your question, but this piece of equipment is not a storage silo. It's actually a cryogenic distillation tower. So the design of it being 52 feet tall is required for it to function.
There is no other way to do this? Two shorter towers?
I did bring this up with Airgas in their engineering. The only way to stay within the confines of the zoning permits would be to install 4 separate plants of a smaller size, which would be 8 compressors and all the associated equipment. And the cold boxes for those 4 plants would be under 45 feet tall.
And the problem with doing that is?
Space.
Massive. I don't think we could fit it on our site.
I don't know what massive means. I don't know what it looks like on the site. I don't know how big that is. How big is it?
4 times that plus a shorter tank.
How big in diameter is it?
How big in diameter is,
This shorter unit?
I don't know.
I have a problem with, as it's been stated many a times over all these things, we're continually relenting to what you guys asked for. It's now another conditional use, it's another conditional use. I'm tired of changing all the rules. We have rules, let's set them up, let's stay with what we can do, work within the confines of what's been approved. I have a problem with approving this.
Director Retzlaff.
Let's be clear, we're not granting an exception or a variance or some unique allowance just to Gale Foods. Gale Foods property is located in an M1 limited industrial zoning district that has a regulation that allows for accessory structures to exceed, and principal structures, to exceed the 45-foot quote-unquote standard maximum height provision with a conditional use permit. What Gales is applying for is available to every property owner that is located in an M1 limited industrial zoning district. So again, it's a slight difference, I think, in some people's eyes, but it's a significant difference. This isn't granting them some special dispensation just because they're Gale Foods. They're taking a code requirement and applying for what's allowed under the law that the village created.
And they're trying to do it in the least amount of foot space available based on the site availability that they have, and at the same time address a concern of the neighborhood, which was noise when filling the nitrogen tanks twice a day.
I understand that, I appreciate that, but, we went through a big, long process with a whole municipal approval and public hearings. Why wasn't this brought forward at that time? Why are we coming back time and time again to ask for additional conditional approvals? I don't like it.
Well, if I could add, I believe this was an item that was brought up as part of the whole plan development district creation and the site plan approval for the building expansion with the facades they promised that are currently under construction. I believe it was unknown what form or extent that facility was going to be needed to be, and thus the reason they didn't propose it as part of that whole package. I would venture a guess they would have loved to provide and applied for that at the same time and not have to go through this, a year later. But now we have those particulars, and they're proposing what they're proposing. I would like to also add that with regard to the height and the location, the graphics that were presented, granted they're a little difficult to see on our screen, but the intent is to show that to the general area, the traveling public in this case, that the tank will be behind the trees that exist on the site in that lower area behind the ledge, if you will, of the bedrock that juts out on that part of the particular property.
Yeah, it's behind there. It's lower back there.
It's lower.
Is that supposed to represent that gray thing is the full height of the tank? Is that what that's representing? Because that's shortly taller than that building, and that building is not 52 feet tall.
I think it's just showing.
And those there are 45-foot tall tanks, so this thing is going to be 12 feet taller than that, 7 feet taller than that?
The perspective in the photos is a little bit difficult, but what we did is we used the height of the telephone poles that are across the street. and the data from We Energies that said how high those telephone poles were and what elevation that they were at based on the topographical maps from Washington County to kind of get that height in there. So that's, to our best estimation, what it would look like.
It drops down back there.
Yeah, how tall are those telephone poles?
Again, the location of the nitrogen facility is sort of, I'll use the term, down in the hole
Yeah.
that exists back there. If you've driven back there, you know what I mean.
There's a wall that comes up, a ledge, a limestone shelf, that's probably the remnants of the quarry from years back, and it drops down in that corner. If you've ever been back there, you could see what it means. It's maybe not a good representation, but what I have a problem with is you're giving the point of view that Gales is the only one we provide this exception to, and that's simply not true. We've done this in TIF 4 for certain heights. We just did it in our industrial park for somebody that wanted to have a holding tank for styrofoam that had to go through the conditional use permit as well, so that they could make something on site. And they did their best to place it in an area that was out of sight of the surrounding neighborhood and at the same time behind the tree line, which they've done here. So to give the perception that Gales is the only one that we allow these types of conditional uses for is wrong. It's not correct. Do they have multiple on their site based on the tanks that they have? Yes, because it's a need of their industry, and each one has gone through its process to get its approval. And would they have loved to have paid everything up front to have it approved at the same time that they came with their development on the corner? Probably, but it wasn't ready, nor did it have a finalized plan to present well at this time. Now it's been worked through, it's been studied, and it's been planned for and engineered. Now we have something we can look at and make a good decision about based on what their need is for something they promised they would do. And now we're going to beat them up for that too. We promised to do this, we're doing it. Well, we don't like that either. How can they win?
Hey, I am willing to work with anybody, but, you know, in 3 months, we're going to have something else come forward, that they're going to look for a conditional use permit. We're going to look for consideration. I recognize that we have approved other towers in other areas, but it was a one-time venture that a business came forward and, look, here's our master plan for our development. We want to put these tanks in this location, and they're screened by trees. This is just an ongoing, continuous, we want to change this, we want to change this, we want to change this.
This isn't a whim of theirs that they want. In fact, it would probably be better if they would just take their deliveries every day and rather than make this investment of what they have on their property. Because they wouldn't have to bring it to this level, nor would they have to go through the expense of what they're presenting here. To just have a truck come and drop off every day has got to be a lot cheaper than making something that's going to generate it on site.
Bring forward a final plan. Bring forward one thing, this is all that we're ever building on this site.
Jesus, David.
Bring the final thing forward.
Who has that? Who has that nowadays? Especially nowadays. You can't even plan 5 years out.
We have listened to all these changes for
November
years.
3rd, and then we'll see what happens.
We've listened to these changes for years. Bring forward what you want to build and be done with it.
That's not, that doesn't happen in any business.
So would you be better off if that was in the industrial park, not in a downtown residential school area?
I am listening to all the people that have come forward complaining that it is a continual evolution of a project in the residential area.
Right, and that's what I was saying. Even though the company has been around for over 100 years, which is had, because I've lived here for 61 years and it's been here as long as I have, there should have been, when they purchased this factory, business, whatever.
You gotta come up here and talk.
When they purchased this in the first place, somebody should have said, hey, listen, you really should move this out in our industrial park. Then we would have more freedom to do things like this. Rather than keep on buying up houses. If somebody said they wanted to turn downtown into a Cedarburg-type area, it's never going to be that.
That was never what.
For one, the traffic goes down Mequon Road. It doesn't be like Cedarburg where the main traffic goes right through downtown. But anyways, you know, that's just how much more land are they going to buy up? They tore down that beautiful church that was there. You know, they tore down those houses to the west or north of them, it's just going to, pretty soon they're going to be tearing down Mrs. Blau's Christmas shop and Jerry's Old Town, and it's going to be just a big mess.
So
Only if the
that's-
private landowners agrees to sell it to them.
No, I know, and they probably paid them a good price, but it's just,
Even
buying
our
and growing and
trustees
growing in a
sold out to
downtown
them. Our trustees have sold out to them too.
Exactly, that's what
So-
my complaint was.
One. Yes, it's only one, but we gotta
He
have an
didn't
end
sell
to
out to
this.
Gales, he sold them his property.
Whatever you want to call
I
it.
don't like that term, sold out to them, that
Okay.
sounds different.
Our trustee has sold their property to Gales.
Thank you.
I just want an end to the madness, because every time something happens here, we get a room full of people, and I'm tired of dealing with it. It's got to stop at some point. What is the end point?
I agree.
Further discussion on the first motion to approve the conditional use permit. Mr. Nellis.
Yeah, I guess I'm still not sure I understand what the impact or the improvement to the noise situation is going to be. I know that was a big concern, it still is a big concern. Will this, and maybe if the representative from Yale Foods could address this, but is this operation 24/7? Is it just during the daytime? Is there, just, could you talk about what type of noise this is going to produce that's different than what's there now?
Sure. Yes, it would be a 24/7 operation. It would provide a gaseous flow of nitrogen to our plant that we currently have instead delivered in bulk and liquid and then evaporate and feed to our plant continuously.
So there's no like on-site storage of the gaseous nitrogen?
No, this is generating it as we use it. In terms of the noise level, we did measure the noise, and granted it is not continuous, but 2 to 3 times a day. The pump that pumps liquid nitrogen from the tanker to our silos right off of 145, we measured at 109 decibels. The loudest portion of this installation, when you're next to it, would be 83 decibels, which is an order of magnitude at least lower in sound level.
So it's 109 decibels 2 or 3 times a day for what, 20 minutes a day, or 20 minutes each, or half an hour, or something like that?
Something like that, yep.
Versus 24 hours a day at 55 decibels at the property line.
At the property line.
Trustee Ball.
However, you are going to bring in the liquid hydrogen once a week, twice a week? What did you say about that?
For the purposes of discussion, we think the most that we would bring it in would be once a week.
So
And that of 4 deliveries a month, 2 of them would be to the existing nitrogen tanks that we deliver to now, and 2 of them a month would be to where this nitrogen generation facility is.
So those are always between 8 and 5 business hours?
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just looking to my boss to confirm that I can say yes,
That's
it's
fine.
between 8 and 5 business.
So we would need to put a stipulation on here to mandate that stays between 8 and 5. If you're still going to have liquid nitrogen delivered once a week, which is going to be the noisy process. So you're not going to eliminate the noise entirely.
Mr. Williams.
While you're out there, can I just piggyback on a couple of the...
Turn your microphone on, Mr. Williams.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, the first one is on the sound. I understand it's going to be 55 decibels at the property line, which I also understand is the sound of about a refrigerator running. However, I'm curious as to what the useful life of those air compressors are, and is it safe to assume that over time they're going to get louder, or they're going to maintain that 55 decibel limit over the entire course of their useful life?
I'm not an expert in compressors, so I can't say for sure. However, Airgas will be maintaining this equipment, which will
They'll be
include-
monitoring the sound, it'll be checked regularly.
or replacing the elements like bearings or motor windings that would cause excessive noise when they start to go bad.
Okay. So somebody will know if it exceeds the 70 decibel limit at some point in time by monitoring it.
We'll know, and when they come for their maintenance trips, they'll notice.
Okay. And then on the size, I think earlier you guys stated almost as a proponent of the silo that it was 6 feet in diameter instead of the 14 feet that are there now. So I'm curious as to why we can't expand the diameter of the tank and decrease the height of the tank. Is it has something to do with the generation of the nitrogen, that it has to be a certain height, or why can't we just make why can't we make the tank wider and shorter?
Certainly, a good question. The reason that it needs to be that height is the distillation process effectively uses gravity to work. So the liquid is pumped in, the gas separates out and travels up, while the liquid travels down. It needs that space in order to function.
Gotcha. Okay. And then last question is, do you guys have pollution liability insurance coverage? And if so, in what amount?
I don't know that I could answer that specifically. In terms of pollution, what specific component of pollution are you concerned about?
I'm just concerned if there is any, I know you had indicated before there's no explosive nature to the gas, but is there any potential risk of emission of this gas, of, any pollution type of risk that could come about from housing this nitrogen there or utilizing it in the plant?
To my knowledge, nitrogen is not considered a pollutant of any kind. Effectively, we're taking the air that's all around us and separating it into its constituent parts of nitrogen and a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen that would then be released back into the atmosphere.
Okay, I'm curious as to why the fire department's concerned about hazardous material equipment then, if they needed to come on site.
I couldn't answer for the fire department. However, a danger of nitrogen systems could be, not that it is, but could be, oxygen depletion of the atmosphere, in which case they have their self-contained breathing apparatuses which supply breathing oxygen. I think that their concern was, when they heard nitrogen, to say, could there be a depletive atmosphere? If I was the fire chief, I would probably say, maybe, and make sure I had the right equipment.
Further discussion on the motion to approve conditional use permit for a 52-foot nitrogen storage tank. Any further discussion? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
None.
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hand. Goes forward with no recommendation. I'm sorry? It is. It doesn't mean it fails. It just doesn't have a recommendation. Right. Next motion.
Make a motion to approve the site development and building plans for the proposed nitrogen generation facility addition to Gales as presented with the 4 conditions.
This was just a site plan review?
Yep.
Okay. Motion made. Do I have a second?
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Baum.
Is this where we should add the hours of operation for this, or should that have been done in the conditional use?
It probably should have been done in the conditional use.
Can we go back to that so I can make that, or should I?
Like that change your vote?
No, it ain't gonna change my vote, but it gives some protection to the people. We'll do it at village board? Okay, I'll do it at village board.
Are they already operating under restrictive hours? Because wouldn't that take precedent?
For filling the tanks, they are.
So, like from 8 to 5, so they'd already be covered that way, wouldn't they?
I personally don't know that, so I'm just trying to make sure.
Further discussion on the site plan review? No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
3-4, same. Last motion.
Is there another one?
Yes, Plan Development District Amendment.
Hold on. I will make a motion to approve the Gales Plan Development District to include a nitrogen generation facility as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, discussion.
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
In light of the trend here this evening, before you vote, is there a particular issue or item that could be corrected that might change the direction of the decision-making? And I ask that because if there is, and you are acceptable to some form of a nitrogen generation facility as an accessory use, this particular item you could approve without regard to the height or the location and that sort of thing. That would be one less item to deal with down the road if there were an alternative proposal presented to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Trustee Baum.
So I'll speak to that. My apprehension is not to the nitrogen generation facility as a whole. My opposition is to the continued conditional use. We always have to make exceptions. If this can fit into our zoning and all of our requirements without a conditional use, I would be more accepting to it. But I'm just really bothered by, again, we have to ask permission to do something special on our site. I just want to see the whole plan up front. I want to know what we're doing here and be done with it and not have them come back again.
I don't think that's realistic.
Can I make a comment? I think if the reason for denying the conditional use is because of how many times they've asked for conditional use permits in the past, it seems not, where's the nexus to what's actually being proposed? What's the connection? I mean, it seems somewhat arbitrary that you're going to say, I'm not going to approve this because you've asked for these things too many times.
I think I will reverse that to you. Where's the nexus for the next thing that we asked for?
But David, look, let's take MGS as an example. If they were held to the same standard that you can only present a build-out scenario one time to the village, they would never be proposing and evolving into this company that is building COVID test kits and expanding their warehouse and distribution, this year, and then 2 or 3 years from now, they want to add another 75,000 square feet. Are we going to say, nope, sorry, you can't do that because you didn't bring it up 3 years ago? It just doesn't seem appropriate.
MGS has not been landlocked, has not had issues that they're buying up everybody around them and irritating the neighborhood. MGS came in and they had all this vacant land and they want to build on their vacant land. I'm not opposed to that. If Gales had acres and acres of vacant land, that would be a whole different issue. But we're buying up all of downtown and stripping away our Main Street district that the community is opposed to.
Okay, well, that sounds a lot different than what you said earlier as the reason for denying it. If you're denying it because it's irritating the neighborhood because of visual impacts or there's some hazardous material or something, that's a tangible, measurable thing that you can, in my opinion, deny or approve something based on. But to deny something simply because it's the 6th time they've asked for a conditional use permit sort of ignores all of the factual information that goes into your assessment of what's being proposed.
What I heard clearly from the residents is, what is the ultimate development here? We got the last expansion, we went through a long and arduous task of getting that approved and worked with the neighbors, and all the neighbors, not all of them, many of them came back and said, okay, we'll accept this. And now we're coming in and wanting something more.
It was part of that plan. to replace the nitrogen, the noise. It was part of that promise. It was part of that discussion. All along, it was part of it.
It was not part of the discussion to put a 52-foot tank in there. We just approved 6 45-foot tanks out in the south side of the building. And I remember hearing grumblings about those tanks. Are they too tall? Well, they're as tall as all the other tanks on the property. I can't oppose tanks that are as tall as everything else they've got.
Right, but in that case, those tanks are right along Main Street and visually impact the neighbors on Main Street. If I recall correctly, the neighbors that came out this evening are located further to the east, not on Main Street,
Daniels Drive.
and are concerned about the relative location of the tank, if at all, in the way that it's been proposed. It's a noise issue that I've heard this evening, and with regard to this facility, I think there was a reasonable response given with regard to the noise that would fall within the parameters of our zoning code for this new facility in an effort to replace an existing process, liquid offloading, that generates significantly more noise.
And if it could be done without any other conditional uses, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But because we're, again, asking for additional consideration from the village, I have a problem with it.
You won't see it. Further discussion on the motion to approve the Plan Development District Amendment. Mr. Nilles.
I guess I'll speak, give you my perspective. I'm not in the same boat as Trustee Baum. I guess I'm just not convinced that this solution addresses the concerns that were brought up originally by the neighborhood as far as the noise. So, in general, I agree with what Director Etzloff was suggesting regarding this PDD amendment, and that I think I will support that and vote to approve that, because I think there is an answer here. I just don't think that this is the right answer. And I think I would also suggest, as technology changes, as things, we can't always live in the present or in the past. Things are going to change. Technology is going to change, which might require some additional considerations that aren't already anticipated in our zoning codes and in our various ordinances. So I recognize that there are going to be times for conditional use permits, and I will, if I'm still on Plan Commission when additional conditional use permits come up, if I think that they'll address the concerns presented, then I'll support them. I'm not convinced yet that that's the case for this particular solution.
Further discussion? Mr. Williams and Mr. Lashowski.
So, just one follow-up. Are you saying there's no liquid, or no nitrogen generator manufactured anywhere that's used at any plant that is any shorter than 52 feet high? That's the minimum height that one can be made in order to utilize it for what you're looking to use it for.
And their needs.
I certainly wouldn't be able to give you an absolute that absolutely there is not ever anywhere. However, Airgas is our contracted supplier for nitrogen, and to meet the flow rate needs that we have, this is the only option.
Okay. And then one other quick question. I don't know if you're able to answer this or not. I'm assuming you guys have done cost analysis and cost benefit analysis and ROI. Is there, it has to be, I guess in my opinion, it has to, from Gail's perspective, there has to be some return on your investment in order to be putting this unit in, right? I mean, it's not going to cost your business more money to operate by putting this unit in than it would be if you continue to take deliveries of the of the nitrogen on a daily basis. Is that fair to say?
I was not involved in the cost discussions, so I don't know. I do know the opportunity is there for us to sign a long-term contract that is of benefit to us for stability.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Leshevsky.
When I look at the photo of the tower, if I read the grading plans correctly, isn't that the quarry section where that's going to be located roughly 8 feet below grade of the road, making us effectively 44 feet above grade? I don't know how you measure it, Jeff, but I guess I think that's relevant. And the other thing, in terms of sound, if you sink that thing 8 feet effectively into the ground, you're not going to have much sound traveling east towards the neighbors. It'll be reflected back towards the plant, dispersed amongst the tanks and whatever else you have in the plant.
It's a tight corner down there.
Yeah, it's a tight corner. It's going to reduce and mitigate a number of the noise impacts, in my opinion. So that's how I get comfortable with it. It's essentially sunk down 8 feet below grade.
Yeah, the height measurement in the zoning code is based off of the finished grade elevation. So even though the tank may be sitting in position next to a rock wall that's an additional 8 feet higher,
Right.
it's still 52 feet high tank.
Technically, right, but
Yes.
effectively, driving down that road, I'm going to see an object 44 feet above the road bed.
Right.
Yeah.
Further discussion? No further discussion?
There is a request from WebEx for additional public comment, if you'd take it.
On the Plan Development District?
I'm not sure, on the Gale proposal.
I don't know if it's relevant in regards to, I mean, we had public hearing, an opportunity at that time. I usually don't say no.
I see.
Based that we're up to this point, I think that if they would want to make that comment, they could still make it at the village board level at that time.
President Walter,
Yes?
I think there's a bit of miscommunication. Our comment is actually about item D.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item D as part of the community.
Short 50.
Okay, well, we're not to that point yet, so we can
Okay.
talk it at that point. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hands. 3 opposed. Mr. Shadid, were you for or against?
I was for.
Thank you. Motion passes. Takes care of all items under...
Mr. Chairman, can I interrupt you for just a minute?
Sure.
Just to clarify, because some of these items go on to the village board, one does not. The conditional use permit and the plan development district amendment are items that require village board action. The site plan that the plan commission voted 4-3 against approving does not go to the village board. That is an item that is taken care of only by the plan commission.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Just, so if there's a thought that the board might approve these items contrary to the plan commission recommendation, the site plan would still have to come back to the plan commission.
Right. Thank you. All right, takes care of all items under C, so that then leaves us for item D, which is Community Development Department 2050 Comprehensive Plan, Reboot, Status Report, and Discussion Items for Project Timeline and Upcoming Activities, Community Survey Results, and Neighborhood District Corridors and Land Use Mapping. Thank you all for coming and spending some time with us tonight. I appreciate it. Just give us just about a minute or two just to let the room clear out.
Sure. Okay, for the last item, it's not my intention to have a lengthy discussion at this point, and it's not intended to be a working session per se. It is intended to be to give you a status report and to provide opportunity to refresh our memories with regard to a couple of important items that are going into our 2050 comprehensive plan project. And in light of the time, at some point we can decide how much detail we want to get into some of those. But with that said, I'll just move forward. Obviously, the consequences of the COVID pandemic have affected everybody in a variety of ways, including our process. It creates significant challenges for satisfying our intended public participation activities and process, and overall public engagement. In a nutshell, to date, I believe you could fairly say that the COVID pandemic has put us back about 7 to 8 months in our planning process. Our last Plan Commission meeting with appreciable discussion about the 2050 plan was back on March 9th, when we listened to a summary of our community survey results and reviewed some graphics that Emily had put together regarding that. Our last working session was even before that, on February 24th, a neighborhood district and corridor mapping exercise on the heels of a similar workshop back in January. Those items and those discussions bore some fruit, but the process there is not complete. To date, in terms of progress, I've got on screen the revised original timeline, and I drew a blue line approximately through the point in the process if we're moving from left to right across the matrix. We're about a third of the way complete with the tasks that we've identified. We've had 1 out of 3 community conversation meetings with the general public, 2 out of 4 if you would include the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan open house that we had at the senior center, that we, as part of the update of that plan, that we sort of brought into the overall umbrella of the comprehensive plan process midway through the activities. So we're about a third of the way done. Our consultant, Grafe, is suggesting that we make some timeline and task adjustments to get us back on track with the goal of having plan adoption in a March or April of 2021 timeframe. It will require us essentially to take 8 to 9 months of remaining tasks, as shown in the original schedule or timeline, into the next 5 to 6 months. One of the principal items that has been sort of kicked around is the notion of saving some time by combining the steering committee and the plan commission into one group and not hold separate meetings before each to discuss the same particular items. So going forward, unless there's some objection, we'll combine the steering committee and the plan commission together. Now, as you are aware, the steering committee is comprised of certain members of the plan commission, the village board, the park commission. We had department head directors involved, and the school district. We will continue to invite those people to our plan commission meetings and workshops where the 2050 plan is the topic, under the guise that it is a joint steering committee plan commission meeting. In terms of possible dates, we're going to be continuing our discussion with the consultant this week, and hopefully finalize in the week to follow a more definitive timeline, reformat it consistent with our original timeline for comparison purposes. But with that, the goal is to have, at this point, our number 2, our second community conversation meeting with the general public the week of November 23rd or the 30th. The end of the month, at that point, I believe the 30th would probably work out best with Thanksgiving holiday. But that would be for purposes of soliciting feedback on our neighborhood, district, and corridor land use mapping, and hopefully one or more of the sub-area plans that we have worked, or that we're working with the consultant on preparing. We would hold the third Joint Plan Commission Steering Committee meeting in the week of December 14th, our third community conversation meeting roughly the week of January 25th, and again, shooting for a February Plan Commission Steering Committee review of a draft plan document and a March-April Village Board review and possible action on a 2050 plan document. There are a number of dates in between there that we'll fill in with possible special meetings of the Plan Commission, including October 26th of this month, and possibly on November 9th, leading up to our next community conversation meeting on either November 23rd or the 30th. As I mentioned to you, we've had a number of challenges presented to us with regard to public participation and community engagement. Our original public participation plan, the PPP, relied on all of our meetings and workshops to be in-person meetings. Clearly, going forward, we need to come up with a different alternative. And one of the, what I'll call a workaround recommended by GRAFE and supported by staff at this point is transitioning to the use of an additional tool or platform for social engagement. It's called Social Pinpoint, and it is an interactive website that is going to be created for us by GRAFE and the Social Pinpoint provider with a dedicated website titled germantown2050.com. And I'll turn things over to Emily at this point to just highlight a few of the features of the Social Pinpoint interactive website that we hope to utilize going forward.
Yeah. So as Jeff said, Social Pinpoint is a toolkit for engaging with the community online. This site features an engagement page, which would be like the homepage, that will have information on the project, list the online engagement options, include a calendar of upcoming events, and information about joining virtual public meetings. There will also be information on the comp plan process and where we are in that process, as well as a place to upload documents for sharing with the public. Social Pinpoint does offer interactive mapping where the public can go on and sort of drag and drop pinpoints on a map and then comment on those pinpoints. So it's hard to see on the screen, but the comments categories listed here are idea, love this, needs work, I want to walk or bike here, or a question related to a specific area on the map. Then the general public can see what others have put on the comment on the map and like or actually like or dislike those comments. So we can get quite a bit of feedback through that.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute. The application of this in our situation would be where we take our neighborhood, district, and corridor map, and we have it either one big map like this, and we ask people to drag their comments with the pinpoints and put them in their neighborhood or their district or their corridor and comment on what information is presented. And what will be presented will not just be a graphic representation of the boundary of that neighborhood, district, or corridor, but as you'll see in a minute, and you may recall, the tabular or the matrix that shows what the neighborhood, district, corridor name is, what the preferred uses are, what's allowed, what's disallowed, what's encouraged, density, some basic policy issues with relating to land use and residential development particularly, so that people can have some ability to comment on specific things. And this would replace, us being up here, going through a presentation, and then asking people to come forward one by one in a public hearing or setting and giving us their opinions. And using this tool, they'll be able to do the same from the benefit and the convenience of their own situation, their own home, and not just to comment on their own neighborhood, but now have the flexibility of looking at, all the other areas in the village that might be of some concern to them. We haven't decided at this point what sort of latitude we will give in terms of the type of comments you could make, but presumably it could be anything from, we like this type of land use, we don't like, the proposal that would allow multifamily development. We may even, I'm sure it's susceptible to it, but we may not necessarily want to encourage people to point out where potholes are, but I'm sure it has that ability to do that as well.
Okay, another feature beyond the map is an ideas wall. In this case, likely this would be tied to the map, but just a place for people to share ideas, not necessarily related to any category, but just ideas in general. There is also an option for a discussion forum, which would provide kind of an ongoing, more detailed discussion on certain topics. And then the site also provides opportunity for visual preference surveys, so we could do that on a variety of different categories. One of the good things about the site that I just wanted to point out is that comments then are not limited to the duration of a public input meeting. It would be open for quite a length of time online, so people can provide comments at their convenience.
One of the concerns that we have at a staff level is how we're currently conducting the meetings we're having. The hybrid in-person for some of us, virtual for others, with very limited capacity in terms of how many people we can bring into a room, whether it's this room or the library meeting hall or the senior center. It's a significant concern. And so my recommendation is that we move further and further in the direction of doing as much as we can virtually in terms of presenting information and requesting and receiving feedback. And for example, with regard to the neighborhood, district, and corridor mapping activities, our next workshop, a work session, if you will, that I would like to have on October 26th, I would like to conduct it entirely virtually with the Plan Commission and anybody else who wants to observe, but with the specific goal of the Plan Commission members meeting virtually and the staff presenting and us discussing and chatting, interrupting each other, and doing what it takes to get some progress done, but to try and initially experiment with going virtually entirely and try and see where we can end up with that. The consultant has indicated, Grafe has indicated to us that the social pinpoint has the capability of combining and presenting and holding virtual meetings through the site, or if not through the site, they can be done in a companion method using our WebEx or Zoom or whatever additional virtual meeting platform we wish to use, but they have also integrated the real-time, live-time polling activity that we did at our first meeting. So they'll have that capability built in as well. So not only will we be able to conduct a meeting virtually, present and receive comment, but also conduct the visual preference surveys or online polling in a real time virtually, which would take full advantage of the tools that we have available to us. So we're in the process of working with Grafe and having this set up, hopefully to be another week or so. We'll get you the information so you can jump online and start seeing what's available. And if necessary, or if you see fit, please take a look at the Social Pinpoint website. There's plenty of example communities. In fact, today was the first day of the Wisconsin APA Upper Midwest Conference, and the first session on virtual public participation and community engagement. They went through a number of examples and used this exact platform, Social Pinpoint, as a tool they're using throughout the Midwest for multiple communities. So I think we're heading in the right direction as far as trying to take advantage of the tools that are available to do the virtual meetings that I'm pretty sure we're going to have to continue doing through next February or March to get this process wrapped up and the plan adopted. So with that, I had asked Emily to be prepared to go over a quick summary of the community survey results, a shorter version of what she went through back in March. In light of the time, I would ask if the Plan Commission members want to go through that, or should we defer that to a later date? We have two people in the audience. No, David, he's a member of the panel.
I can't breathe up there. I go through it. Let's hear a quick synopsis.
All right.
Okay, so I know we went over this, so I will just hit the high points. There are a total of 1,819 survey respondents, which is approximately 10% of the total population over 18 in Germantown. The survey timeline was between September 9th and November 1st of 2019, and we had an average of 1,633 responses per question. So we can talk through some of the areas that we can assume there's some demographic differences between our response and the population as a whole. If we compare this information with the 2017 American Community Survey 5-year estimates, we see that we had low representation from those in the 25 to 35 age range, as well as lower representation of those between 45 and 54, but greater percentage of respondents in the 35 to 44 age range. Nearly 40% of respondents indicated that they have lived, worked, or owned property in the village for 20 or more years. Just 4% of respondents have lived, worked, or owned property in the village for 1 year or less. This graphic looks at where the respondents live, work, or own property in the village. Nearly 58% of respondents lived within that Zone 5, which is the green zone on the map. In the central zone, Zone 4, in orange on the map, was the other most represented zone in the village with 18% of respondents. 88% of respondents reported living in a single-family dwelling, 2.4% in a two-family, and 5.9% in a multifamily dwelling. I would point out that over 4% of respondents selected other. With that being said, I would say about 90% of those responses were condo or gables, which we can pretty safely assume are multifamily structures. The next graph, looking at the number of respondents living in two-family and multifamily dwelling units by age. Some may assume that as the population ages, that we would see a lower percentage of the population living in multifamily units. However, we can see that after the age of 45, a rising number of the respondents to our survey indicate living in multifamily housing. 19% of respondents, or about 2 out of 10 respondents, reported working in the village of Germantown, meaning that 8 out of 10 employees, 8 out of 10 employed individuals leave Germantown every day for work. This is fairly consistent with the 2017 American Community Survey estimates. 44% of respondents indicated they have children under 18 living in their household. This is higher than the 2017 ACS 5-year estimates, which indicates 34% of the almost 8,000 households have children under 18 living with them. The survey respondents indicated that the 3 most important factors on quality of life were public services, police and fire, low crime, and good neighbors. On the flip side, respondents of the survey indicated that the least important factors were diversity of age, diversity of race, and mix of uses. When asked to rate the quality of life in Germantown, over 83% chose good or excellent. The greatest number of respondents indicated that the quality of life over their time in Germantown has stayed the same, followed closely by somewhat improved. Now these measures are subjective, as we have discussed in past meetings. We did not include a definition of the options, but the perception of quality in life in Germantown is positive. We did see, looking at data from 2015, we did see a slight decline in the result. There's about a 5% decrease in the percentage of people that indicated good or excellent, and about a 5% increase in those that selected somewhat declined. Note that we did not necessarily survey the same individuals in 2019 as we did in 2015, and again, it's a fairly subjective question. I think the main takeaway from this question is that there are very few respondents that indicated the quality of life in Germantown is fair or poor. And again, 83% of respondents see the quality of life in Germantown as good or excellent. We asked questions about which types of development were supported in the village in certain areas and across the village as a whole. There's a lot of data there, so we chose to highlight a few numbers that were found to be particularly representative of responses. In terms of desired types of residential housing in the village, single-family detached was desired, multifamily condos, and conservation subdivisions. In terms of what is undesirable, based on responses to the survey, manufactured homes and conventional subdivisions. In terms of what types of land uses should be allowed in the undeveloped rural areas outside of the urban service area, hobby farms, 10-plus acres, were supported generally, and multifamily residential was unsupported. Respondents did show strong support for additional sit-down and family restaurants and additional entertainment attractions in Germantown. Looking at the question regarding the most appropriate areas in the village for multifamily housing, we can see the strongest support by respondents for development near the I-41-45 corridor. Nearly 30% of respondents supported multifamily housing anywhere served by village sewer and water utilities. Here were these results influenced by where a respondent lives in the village. we can, if we have any questions on where the support based on living is, we can get into detail about that, but for now, I'll skip over that. We did ask a question about respondents' attitude toward future rural development. This question included 3 statements. The most supported statement was about allowing development as long as it preserved rural character. There's slightly less support for protecting all existing undeveloped farm land and other agricultural land from future development. And then finally, there was the least support for allowing development as the property owner chooses. So again, we wanted to look at how attitudes changed based on where a respondent lives in the village. This groups the zones into more rural and more suburban zones, but you can see a pretty large increase in the percentage of respondents living in rural areas of the village that strongly support the protection of all undeveloped land, with 41% and just 22% from the more suburban areas of the village. This data is new. We've added, since the last time we looked at this, it's from the same survey, but we added some questions related to the Parks and Recreation questions. Overall, people are very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with the quality of Germantown's parks. 73% of respondents think it is important that the village acquires land for linear parks along the Menominee River and other environmental corridors for paths for walking, hiking, biking, nature observation, and water access where appropriate. This question looks at how many times members of a household have visited parks within the village of Germantown. You can see that, 46.9%, or almost, 47% visited parks in the village of Germantown more than 10 times in the past year. And then we see a less participation in the recreational programs, but 12% have participated more than 10 times. 6 to 10 times was 7.4%, and 1 to 5 times was 36%. The top park amenities desired by respondents, the first was paved trails, the second was concessions or beer garden, outdoor pool or aquatic center, canoe, kayak launch, and then unpaved trails. 73% of respondents think Germantown has enough enough public active recreation land, such as baseball diamonds, soccer fields, tennis courts, basketball courts, etc. 46% of respondents think that Germantown could use more passive recreation land, such as walking trails, wildlife observation, canoeing, kayaking, bird watching, bicycling, and picnicking. The Germantown Gateway has been a hot topic of conversation in the past couple of years with the extension of water and sewer and the industrial construction taking place. So we asked this question specifically about which types of development are supported or which are least supported. You can see restaurants, specialty retail and boutiques, large lot, single-family residential, and grocery stores were the most supported types. The least supported types were multifamily residential, big box retail, independent and assisted senior housing, and offices, banks, and financial institutions. This question looks at, over the past year, how many times have you used the recycling center? You can see that the largest percentage of respondents either did not know about the recycling center or did not use the service in the last year. I would note that the support to keep the recycling center within the village increased as the number of uses per year increased, which makes sense. Additionally, there was a correlation between the number of years a resident has lived within the village and the number of trips annually to the recycling center. So, any questions on that?
The survey summary results will be presented within the plan document in various sections. We haven't decided exactly where and how that's going to take place yet, but the overall document will be included as part of an appendix with a freestanding summary report along the lines of what has been presented so far will be made available as well. So that's our community survey results. Interestingly enough, I mean, some of the questions and the responses, make you wonder, what are we going to do? For example, the gateway question, the gateway being the Holy Hill Road corridor and I-45 interchange. You look at the list of preferred uses, large lot, single family, sit-down restaurants, and things that for current reasons, are questionable. Certainly the survey was taken before COVID-19. I don't know how the differences would look if we surveyed people today. But more importantly, with regard to a density of residential development, putting large lot, single family in that particular area that's now served by water and sewer strikes one to be very inefficient. So it's a matter of trying to come to grips with what are we going to allow and encourage and what sort of density is acceptable for those types of areas throughout the village. Which is sort of a good segue to our neighborhood district and corridor mapping. If you recall, this is the graphic that was sort of the product of the work sessions in January and February. The concept of dividing the village, all the lands in the village, and assigning it to a particular neighborhood or a district or a corridor, effectively a unique area that shares characteristics in terms of land use and potential development, environmental features and the like. This was our I don't want to say our first attempt, but it's our second or third version that will be further refined in the next couple of weeks by staff to take some more of the recommendations that were discussed and formalizing them in more definitive ways. Some of the boundaries are going to change, but also the tabular information. If you recall, the whole idea is to identify not just the boundaries of those contiguous areas, but also identify a general description of them and the types of preferred land uses in terms of future development, and what sort of densities would be allowed or acceptable, and also what sort of, with regard to residential, what sort of preferred design when we get into a traditional versus a conservation subdivision design. Those things we talked about a little bit with the consultant back in March and February. You will recall that our focus, if we were to take the village and divide it into, just for tonight's purposes, 4 separate areas, the northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. Our focus really, at our last discussion, centered on the northeast part of the village, an area that we have identified as a rural preservation district that, for all intents and purposes, has a scattering of a smaller lot residential, a lot of large lot residential and undeveloped tracts of land that are either environmentally sensitive or used for agricultural purposes or are sitting unused at this point. We talked about the current policy with regard to residential development, which is a 5-acre density, a 5-acre minimum lot size. There's some ideas kicked around on how to approach and better deal with this in terms of preserving that particular area. There were opinions suggesting that a 1/5 density and lot size will, in the end, result in just a sprawling residential development of relatively small tracts of land and not necessarily achieve the overall concept of preserving a rural character and appearance, much less preserving land for agricultural purposes. We talked at the survey itself, some of the respondents were suggesting that outside the urban service area, one of the best uses would be, 10-acre hobby farms. How does that fit into the Rural Preservation District is a question that we need to answer. There was discussion with the consultant about possibly building in a conservation subdivision allowance along the lines of, one, sort of a two-step process, possibly reducing the density allowance allowed by right. Right now it's 1/5, maybe it goes to 1/10 or 1/20, but then build in a provision that allows, with a conservation subdivision approach, you could have a higher density of maybe 1/5 or 1/10, where the development occurs on a lot that's between 1 to 2, maybe 3 acres in size at most, where they're clustered together and larger tracts or areas of the environmental area is preserved in perpetuity as open space, overall as a method of trying to preserve the rural character and appearance of those areas in the northeast part of the village. Those were just some ideas that were kicked around. There was no definitive answer that was agreed upon or even put to the group, but those are decisions, those policy-related decisions and discussions we need to have in the coming weeks and months. We also talked about the northwest part of the village, specifically the gateway area, the purple area shown there along the Holy Hill Road corridor and I-40-145 interchange. We talked about how the sewer service area that was recently adopted sort of jibes with the purple area that's highlighted there, but at the same time, the potential for extending sewers to serve that area goes beyond that particular purple area outward in a direction to the west and slightly to the north. That needs to be considered, particularly when we're talking about identifying areas for suitable future development. So, like I said earlier, it's not my intention that we sit down and roll up our sleeves tonight as a working session, but I just wanted to sort of refresh your memory as to where we're at. We asked members of the Plan Commission to take their shot at filling out the matrix with allowable uses by the various neighborhoods, districts, and corridors. We had a couple of good responses provided, but for the most part, we're still lacking in this level of detail. And at this point in the process, my intention is to work with the consultant in the next week or so, use the information that we have received from the Plan Commission members and complete the chart, the matrix, make some adjustments to the neighborhood district and corridor mapping for the area, for the village, and present that to the Plan Commission on October 26th, where we will sit down, roll up our sleeves, and talk about, and hopefully start making some firm decisions as far as what you want to recommend to the village for presentation to the public at some point in November at the next community conversation. So with that, I'd ask you, does anybody have any questions at this point? Anybody who can't sit in and attend on October 26th? As far as it's Monday, it's 2 weeks from now, it would be our normal special meeting date, fourth Monday of the month.
We do have an interested resident looking to make comment on this item.
Okay, go ahead.
Jen, did you want to make a comment on this item?
Oh, yes, thank you. There's kind of a background thing going on. Couple of questions. We've all been shut in because of COVID, and now it seems like we're trying to stay on the timeline and kind of steamroll this through. There's a lot of information and a lot of checkpoints that need to be made. We discussed, it wasn't in the packet, this social pinpoint. You have the survey from 2019. You're talking about utilizing social pinpoint. I would imagine that would be used by primarily residents. And how much time would you want to be able to have the social pinpoint and the opportunity to put some of their comments in, and how is that going to influence what happens in the timeline or the residents or the neighborhoods, or how you're going to use that information with the consultant. And then finally, is the social pinpoint a separate cost to the village, or is that part of the GRAFE survey? I'm not clear on that. And I think that just some of my observations from the survey, which was in the packet, I think we really need to focus, because of COVID, part of the survey said, well, we need more restaurants, sit-down restaurants and family restaurants. It's not going to happen right now. Until there is a vaccine, I don't think anybody's going to start up a new business in downtown Germantown nor any other location. I think that I know that most restaurants are having a real tough time right now, and in the food industry, and they're just trying to keep their heads above water and keep their doors open. So how do we extrapolate expanding business when we know there's downturn in businesses such as restaurants and family restaurants and sit-down restaurants that would really attract people to downtown? So my suggestion is, because it would be hard. You can plan it, but you can't, I don't think, identify and reach out to restaurants. But I believe that the passive recreation land use is going to be extremely important going forward. This pandemic, I think, has really opened up everybody's eyes. I think that the use of land in walking trails, wildlife observation, canoeing, kayaking, bird watching, bicycling, picnicking, all the outside activities is going to be extremely important. We're training ourselves to do this now, and it's just going to become more popular, not only in the sports arena, but also in all these natural areas. And then to the point, I'm frustrated with the Plan Commission from the 2020 land use plan and the debacle at Kimber Park that was always supposed to be a park, which is no more. How can you say, how can we defend and actually make wildlife areas in perpetuity without changing it in the next generations to come? I mean, I think it's really important for us to think about these things when we're planning, because everybody tries to come in and change. Everybody tries to take the wetland and grow some dirt in it and grow some seeds on it. Everybody has, they're covering up certain wetlands, the DNR pulled back. Why couldn't Germantown have a higher restriction on some of these lands and be totally unique to other parts of the state? I mean, if we don't start preserving our land and using it properly, we're not going to have it, and especially our waterways. We're connected to the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. Yes, we get water, but these wetlands, they have a purpose, not only to cleanse the earth, but as a resource and an eco-environment to wildlife. So how can we be stewards of our land? How can we teach our children to be better stewards of the land and give the residents and draw in residents that want to have more outside venues? Because I don't see our behavior changing in the next year. We don't have a vaccine. It's going to take a long time to disseminate it, and then there's going to be repercussions. So my main question is, I have two of them. We only had 1,819 respondents to the survey in Germantown of 20,000 people. Is that a high percentage of respondents? And then what is the cost of this social pinpoint, and is GREAT going to be, is it part of their system? And when does it start and when does it end? And who's going to be able to access it? Will it be on the Germantown Village website, etc.? I think that one of your maps, you had zones. I don't see why you couldn't have little meetings within the zone to get the residents in that zone get their feedback. And there's one map that has about 5 different zones, maybe 6, and try and do it that way. Those are my comments. I sincerely hope that the Plan Commission really takes these issues to heart and protects our land. Thank you.
I can respond to the questions that I understood, not necessarily the ideological positions that Jan has. I respect those and appreciate those, and those are things that everybody needs to consider. But with regard to the actual questions that were asked, certainly the usefulness of social pinpoint being introduced at this part in the process is a concern. It's not our intention to try and start over with new survey-type information, but maybe more to supplement and maybe drill down into some of the questions we've already asked, where some of the answers we got are sort of not revealing enough, and we'll be looking at that a little bit closer as time goes on. The timing of the feedback to the overall process, yes, that too is a concern. How long would an activity or a mapping exercise be available to somebody to the point where it would be actually useful information? That is a concern, but that'll sort of shake out depending upon when we can get it up and running and when we have the neighborhood district and corridor mapping exercise complete, and at least to a point where we want to take it public, for public feedback, I should say. The statistical significance of the existing survey, I don't know the actual numbers, but I believe it is strong. No? Emily has some information.
Yeah, it was, we can't really say whether or not the survey is statistically significant, because we don't truly have a random sample of respondents. Let's see here. We do know that 10%, generally speaking, of a community survey is a fairly high percent, and Grafe was very impressed with this outcome. But we can only say that the survey is representative of those responses that we received.
Okay. I stand corrected, but at least we have, I think it's like you said, the percentage of respondents of the overall population is good, and compared to the 2015 survey is comparable. In the last question, cost. Yes, there is a minimal cost for the social pinpoint, getting that set up and having a unique URL address for the Germantown 2050. However, in discussing that with the consultant, we were able to identify some cost savings in some other areas, so it's not going to increase the budget overall. It'd just be a different location for the money. I mean, one of the things we're going to be saving on, honestly, is some of the travel, the expenses, the direct costs that would have been incurred for them to travel if we're going to be holding virtual versus in-person meetings and discussions. I mean, right now, all of our discussions with the consultant are virtual compared to pre-COVID, where everything was pretty much in-house or on the phone for a few things. But so those are the answers that I have to the questions that were posed, I believe.
Other questions?
Anybody have any other questions in regards to the survey or what the plan is going forward? Anything else to add? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all for your comments tonight. I appreciate that. Does anyone have any announcements they'd like to make? If there are no announcements, then we can adjourn. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you all for watching. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Bill.
Definitely.